Chocolate. It's everywhere, and you can get it in almost anything. The average American is said to consume around 12 pounds of chocolate each year, the average European even more. It's an industry that is estimated to bring in over $100 billion a year. But what do you actually know about chocolate? With a story as rich as its flavor, the journey of chocolate is not that well known. Humans have been consuming cocoa for 3,000 to 5,000 years. The cocoa plant originated around the equator in Central and South America. Some accounts say at first it was fermented to create an alcoholic drink, but it was also mixed with corn and heated up to create a bitter, frothy drink. It would have been something similar to a hot chocolate. For the people who first inhabited these areas, cacao was a special plant. The pods were a part of the culture. Shamans would use cacao as part of rituals. It would be used as a medicine and even as a currency. A turkey could be bought for around 100 beans. A lot of the original tradition and intention behind cacao rituals was lost, as the cultures of these areas were deeply changed by the arrival of colonial forces. You can find people today who practice a modern form of cacao ritual. Their purpose is related to elevating the spirit, opening the heart, and connecting with a deeper sense of self. As their popularity grows, ceremonial cacao is becoming much easier to find. It's a less processed, more bitter cousin of what we know as chocolate. The interesting thing is, cacao does actually have a chemical effect on the human body. The reason that chocolate makes so many people feel good is because it does actually make you feel good. It contains something called theobromine, as well as a very small amount of caffeine, both of which are stimulants. As well as these, there are other chemicals which have relaxing effects, create feelings of euphoria, and potentially hallucinations. However, these are all found in such small concentrations that their effects would be very subtle if you notice them at all. One of these compounds is a cannabinoid mimic, which will attach to the same receptors in your brain as typical cannabinoids. There's a case discussed in the International Journal of Legal Medicine where a lawyer tried to get his client's positive cannabinoid test thrown out in court. He used chocolate as the excuse. He claimed that his client had eaten a large amount of chocolate prior to taking the test. The courts tested the theory, found that it wasn't possible, and the client was convicted. While it's not a total get-out-of-jail-free card, chocolate does still have some benefits. More than one study has found that the theobromine in cocoa strengthens your teeth more effectively than fluoride. A study done in Germany found evidence that consuming cocoa may have an effect on the skin which can help it repel UV rays, something like an internal sunscreen. Scientists at the University of California found evidence of something called flavonoids in cocoa. A diet rich in these can reduce the risk of heart disease. Another study done on the flavonoids in chocolate found that they can increase blood flow to the brain. In Italy, during one of the few studies that wasn't funded by the chocolate industry, they found that consuming dark chocolate might actually help your body process sugar. Most cocoa and chocolate has gone through several processes to create a smooth taste. As flavonoids are typically bitter, this means they're no longer present. The ceremonial cacao mentioned earlier should still have these present. Chocolate might be great for humans, but the same can't be said for all animals. Dogs, for example, can't eat cocoa because the theobromine in caffeine can be lethal for them. Theobromine is found in varying levels in chocolate. The darker and more bitter a chocolate bar is, the more cocoa it has in it. And the more cocoa, the more dangerous it is. There are also reports of effects on cats, birds, rodents, and reptiles. Chocolate in high enough quantities could even kill a human. However, it's very unlikely you'd be able to eat that much at one time. It would take about 12 pounds of dark chocolate to start having toxic effects. That's the amount the average American eats throughout the course of a whole year. Before the chocolate bar gets to you, it goes through several processes. The main ingredients in a bar of chocolate are cocoa butter, sugar, and cocoa mass. Cocoa mass is what you get when you grind down the beans, and if you press that, you'll get cocoa butter and cocoa powder. Before grinding cocoa beans, they have to be roasted, and before that, they're dried out in the sun, which is done to stop the fermentation process, which is started as soon as they're taken out of the pod. The creamy brown chocolate that we know and love starts its life as a sweet purple seed covered in a white sticky pulp. Some people say it tastes like a lychee or a Jolly Rancher. There are 4 main varieties of cacao plant that are used to make chocolate. Each one takes about 4 to 5 years to be able to produce a full crop of pods. Trees can produce anywhere between 20 to 70 pods a year. Each pod contains somewhere between 20 to 60 seeds or beans. It takes around 400 beans to make 1 pound of chocolate. Averaging around 1,800 beans per tree means you get about 4.5 pounds of chocolate from each tree each year. That equals around 40 Hershey's chocolate bars. Cacao trees currently only grow between 10 to 20 degrees from the equator. Each year, around 4 million tons of cocoa are produced, and around 90% of that comes from family-owned farms that are smaller than 5 acres. While the cacao plant originated in South America, it's now grown in several countries around the world, including Madagascar, Guatemala, Indonesia, the Philippines, and the state of Hawaii. Chocolate gradually rose to global fame after it was discovered by the Spanish during their invasion of South America in the 1500s. To keep up with the increasing demand, slaves were brought from Africa to South America to cultivate the crop. Then around the end of the 1800s, which was a little over 100 years ago, the plant was taken to West Africa, where it's still grown today. In fact, the majority of cocoa sold around the world is grown in this region, with Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire being the leading producers. 60 to 70% or 2/3 of all cocoa eaten in the world comes from this region. In part 2, we'll look a little bit more into this area and what the chocolate industry is like for them.